today we are going to get started with our Sage 100 2015 and ACA Compliance webinar. Presenting today is going to be Ms. Ty Duncan Whitcomb. She is our resident expert on this. And again, we'll be getting more information at Sage Summit next week. So with all this, I'm going to turn everything over to Ty and let her begin the presentation. Ty, thanks.
All right, so Sage 100 2015 and ACA, lots of good, fun stuff. I'm going to briefly go over the 2015 version. There's some great buzz stuff in there, but 2015 was it so far has been a very solid version that has been released so far for the Sage product. We've moved quite a few clients over to it, and so far, knock on wood, we're having no issues. So hopefully we can continue to make sure that continues to happen. So 2015 was all about making it easier to do business. So a lot of the new things that got added into the system is multi-column sorting. So you now have the ability during data entry and check deposit, cash receipts, manual check, vendor transfers of invoices, especially if you're doing credit card vendors. You now have the ability to sort all your different columns however you need to be able to sort them in the system to give you a better usability. Color coding. Before in Sage, color coding used to be background. You now have the ability to either make the background a certain color or you have the ability to make the frame of your screen a certain color. So if you were doing all green, all blue, or all whatever, instead of overpowering your screen, you can now just make the edges of your screen be a certain color. So it kind of makes it a little bit more friendlier on the eyes, especially if you're like us that have older eyes. It kind of helps in that whole process. So there's kind of what that edge of the screen looks like. So that was one of the new features. Another one is before in the trial balance, for you to be able to tell it's out of balance, the trial balance was the only thing to be able to tell you that your system was out of balance. They have now added into all your reports, even the general ledger detail report, you can now tell if your GL detail report is out of balance now. They've now included that message so you can quickly see if your detail report is out of balance. And all your daily transaction registers now have the ability to print full reports. Some did, some didn't, but now you can print full comments on pretty much all your reports on the daily transaction register. Reversing journal entries. Reversing journal entries. If you put a journal entry in, you had to check that box or go into the system. And when you put in that journal entry, you had to flag it and put a reversing date. Now you have the ability to go into account maintenance, select a journal, and just click this little reverse button, and it will automatically reverse the journal entry for you back out of the system. So it's been asked a lot. It was on the Sage Idea website for quite a bit. It had at least 70+ votes on it. So that was one of the reasons why they added it into the site. And while I'm at this, I would tell y'all if y'all have different items that you want Sage to add to the product, log out to the Sage Idea site and add your ideas, or if you see what you really want out there but maybe it doesn't have enough votes, go ahead and check the box and add more votes because you can potentially see that change added into the next release of the software. So vendor name expansion. Before, as you know, you only had in the system 30 characters for vendor names. Vendor names, you now get 50 characters in your vendors in the system. It was a big thing. People with checks, you had to cut a check and the check would cut it off, or you would take the second line and you would put it into address line 1 and do a bunch of gymnastics for it. Now you don't have to worry about that anymore. Now all vendor names, you now get 50 characters for your vendor names in the system, so now you have the ability to get everything that you need to print on the check. This also was another one that came from the Sage Idea site. Level 3 credit card processing. We can talk about this more in detail. I just want to bring it up briefly in that it's now included in the Sage 100 product in version 2015. So if you need to do level 3 credit card processing, that capability is now in the system. If you had it before, you had to do it as a modification to your system. Well, now it's actually included as part of the product, so you can now do that. Purchasing. We now have the ability to do purchase order history in the system. Before, if you remember, you could do purchase order recap, or you could hold your purchase orders for 999 days and then you lost them. You didn't have them anymore. Well, it's now part of the system. Just like you have sales order history, you now have purchase order history. So when you do your data conversion for Sage for the very first time, to convert your data from whatever version you're on to 2015, it's going to stop and ask you, do you want to retain it? And if you tell it yes, it's going to go through and then create all your purchase order history based off all the history that you currently have in the system. And all that's going to do, it's going to take it from AP, from purchase order, so in inventory, so that it can create accurate purchase history for you. And so what's going to end up happening is now how you have sales order quote history inquiry, you're now going to have a purchase order history inquiry button in Sage so that you can go back and look at that information. Also, another feature from sales order that they've moved over into purchase order is the ability to copy from. So you now can copy purchase orders from history, from receipt history, from invoice history. You now have the ability to copy one purchase order from another, the template or the same purchase order that you're purchasing all the time, but you probably don't necessarily want to do a repeating purchase order or a master PO for it. All right. So there's also a new report in the system because of this. There's a new report called the Purchase Order History Report. It prints in landscape. It will label everything in the system that is drop shipped in the system, so it'll be labeled with a D, so you'll be able to see what the difference is, and you'll be able to purge your purchase order history. So if you want to start purging this or purging obsolete purchase orders, you will now have that ability, and it also has the same keep window open after. Just like how all the other modules like an AR and sales order do, so you will have that same capability. Also in purchase order, just like sales order, the ability for it to redisplay the document after printing, you now have that choice also in the system, just like you do in sales order. You know, in sales order where you can hit the print button, and then if you wanted some, in sales order it used to be you hit the print the sales order and then it disappeared and you had to remember what the sales order is to be able to bring it up again. You now have that ability also in purchase order. So if you print a purchase order, instead of it disappearing off the screen, you can tell it keep the purchase order up on the screen just in case maybe you need to edit it or do something else. You have that with purchase orders, and you have that with return orders or return of good orders. In inventory, copying new items. When you copy an item from another, before in the past, it would automatically copy all the aliases and all the item vendors for the old part to the new part. Well, now you have the ability to select whether you want to copy the alias information or the item vendors. The bad part about this always has been is if you copied the alias items over in the system, then what would happen is you would end up with duplicate alias items, and then as you know, if you went into sales order or purchase order and typed in that alias, it would just come to the first alias and stop, and maybe you didn't want to use that part number anymore, especially if you had it made it inactive. So you now have the ability to selectively copy certain information whenever you do that in inventory. The Affordable Care Act, that's a big part of 2015. I'm going to go over this in another slide after we finish this one. And then what's next? 2015 already has its first service update. It's not because necessarily more for patches, but it was more for it was for functionality that was added into the system. So the ACA became part of it. It added a bunch of new visual process flows into the system. And then it gave you the ability to not print pick sheets if a customer is on credit hold. So before, in the past, pick sheets, you can still override that. Well, now you have the option to not print a pick sheet if a customer is on credit hold. It can't slip through the cracks and somebody can't go over somebody and print the pick sheet anyway because maybe it's their friend and they really want the order shipped even though we know the order shouldn't go out the door. We now have that ability into the system. And then we have a few other things. One of the big ones is that check printing in progress or that bank code and use logic. You now have a message that will actually show you who was locking up check printing or who's actually locking up bank codes in the system. Before it was vague and you would have to call around to everybody saying, are you in it, are you in it, are you in it? Now you can figure out exactly. So if you're in payroll and it says it's in progress, you'll be able to know, okay, is somebody else doing another payroll batch or is somebody in AP? You'll be able to know exactly what is locking it up and what is causing that issue to happen now in the system. Any questions so far about 2015? Anything you want me to review more in depth? Whatever, throw it out there and let me see if I can answer them before we switch and start talking about the ACA stuff.
I think you're good, Ty.
All right. The BIS part, ACA, this is the part that is the biggest part in a lot of ways. So let's do that. So ACA, we're going to go through this, and this is a lot that I know a lot of people are caring about. I'll start this off. It's in a later slide, but I'll start it off now. ACA reporting for SAGE right now is only available at version 2014 and 2015. They should be releasing 2013, and even though SAGE says 4.5 should be released, I'm going to err on the side of if they release it, I will be shocked. And the reason why I'm saying that is because support for version 4.5 ends in roughly 2 months. So as of September 30th, SAGE will no longer be supporting version 4.5. So if they release it, I'm going to tell you now, consider it a blessing. But if they don't be surprised, just because SAGE typically will not release updates or patches for products that they no longer support. All right? So let's just go ahead and let's go through and discuss it. We're going to go over what ACA is, what isn't covered by SAGE in the whole ACA, and then I'm going to briefly take you through all the new reporting and how you need to set up that information for all of that ACA. For you, and then also show you a resource where you can get more information on ACA and also how ACA works with SAGE 100. All right, so what is it? It is the Patient Protection Affordable Care Act, also known as ACA. It was signed into law in 2010, as we all know, and we are now all scrambling to make sure that we're in compliance with it. So as of 2015, if you have 50 plus full-time employees or a combination of that, which means 2 part-time employees equals 1 full-time employee, you are now required to follow the rules of ACA and all the reporting that is due with it. So you're going to need to track all the employee and dependent health care. There will be IRS forms that you will need to fill out. You will be e-filing if you have 250 plus employees. And then you will also be able to mail forms with that ACA to all your employees, because now your employees are going to need to know that information if the law continues the way it is, because on a personal standpoint, there will be information that employees will need to file in regarding to ACA. All right? So what is SAGE doing? SAGE has put a crystal report into the system to help you determine if you're a large employer. They're also giving us an employee maintenance screen and an employer maintenance screen. And in the e-filing and reporting, they're going to give you the ability to e-file the forms or to be able to print out those forms and mail them out yourself. So just like you had in the past for the filing of W-2s, be able to print them to paper and file them yourselves, that form will now also be on the federal e-filing and reporting menu to either e-file it yourself or to print them out and mail it in, depending on whether you're over or under that 250 employee count number. So right now, SAGE is saying that it is supported for versions 4.5, 2013, and 2014, and obviously we know it's already available in 2015. SAGE, though, has only released the version, the compliancy in the product, though, for versions 2014 and 2015. We are waiting on 2013, and again, as I said, we are waiting on version 4.5. I already reiterated that in the very beginning. So those are the versions that are supposed to be supported out on Sage City. Hopefully y'all are all on Sage City. It's a great way for you to connect with other peers in your industry or other industries just to get good information. But Sage on Sage City has put out there a section dedicated to ACA. It was put out by their ABRIT department, which is our HR, our Human Resource Department at Sage, and they have compiled all those information together out there for you. There's free on-demand training out there to give you more information about the ACA, information to find out, are you ready for ACA? Tons of stuff out there. What's your mandate, benefits, the compliancy, all those things are out there as good information. And then out there, they have broken it down by version. So if you go down and look here underneath the Sage 100 section, there's a section also dedicated out here that is specific to your version of the software, and it will just take you through a webcast if you want to go out there and look at it, and also the different information of when will Sage support it and how Sage will support it. But I'm going to go through that for you right now. All right. We'll come back to some of that. All right, so what does Sage 100, the enhancement, does not do? It does not go through and do any of this. It doesn't do the penalty calculations. It doesn't do any of the ACA kind of, whether you're subject to it or not. You'll need to talk to your accountant, or if your company is that, you will get that information from them. Sage is not a full service. The product in Sage is not a full service ACA in that they can answer all the legal questions and stuff for you. You will need to talk to your accountant, but it will give you the reporting and so on and so forth for it. Out there on the Sage 100, out there on Sage City, it will kind of give you this kind of diagram out there to kind of follow you, but it's not going to calculate your monthly penalties and so on and so forth based off of this diagram. It's just going to simply give you reporting and how to set that information up. The information that Sage then gives you, you would then take and plug into the IRS reporting to be able to give you those calculations and penalties as you need it. This is this form so far to date. This form is still subject to change per the government, per the IRS, but this right now is your 1094C, which is what is going to be needed and that you're going to need to report to be able to give this information to the government. Again, as I said, this is subject to change. When you use Sage e-filing and reporting, which is powered by Atrix, which is Sage's company that we've been using to make sure that we stay up to date on forms, whenever at any given time, if you were to use the Sage e-filing reporting, providing that you have your system updated with the latest updates, you will get the latest approved release form from the IRS. So from a form standpoint, you will always be in compliance. Again, here's just kind of what the forms look like, and then you have the 1095C, which is what you file saying who your employees are and the months that they're covered. You have all that information. So let's turn and talk about Sage. In Sage, there is a new report underneath the menu, providing you have the patch, but the service update for version 2014 and 2015. Underneath your reports, underneath your Sage menu, you will have a new menu called ACA, and I'm going to actually show you what that looks like. So give me 1 second to load it, and I'm going to actually show you what that looks like. So in Sage, underneath Payroll, and it looks like I don't have mine, so it means I haven't installed my service update. Not good. There is a new menu in the system called ACA. And let me see if one of these screens will show it to me. And it's not showing me, so we'll go back. Sorry, I apologize. Anyway, Sage has a new screen in ACA, in Payroll, called ACA. And underneath there is where you will find your reporting, the ability for you to access the ACA employee maintenance in the system, and for you to be able to see all that information. that ACA report is going to give you what you're looking for. It will break down and tell you the hours of all the employees that they work for you by month, and then Sage at the very end of the report will then tell you the number of full-time employees you have, the number of FTEs that you actually have, and the FTEs means it's a combination of part-time and to create the FTE, and then it will give you the number of full-time. These are people who are true full-time employees, and then it will give you the numbers by month of did you have all those employees that are needed for you to be in compliance with the reporting that is required starting on January 2016. So once you go through and you have that reporting, in the system you have an employer maintenance screen. By year you'll go through and put who your employer is, and then in here it will show you in here the employee counts, the total employee counts. There's things in here to allow for aggregated groups. Aggregated groups being if you have multiple companies that you have payroll for, but you still report to them maybe as one number, just so that you can get maybe a better break of the government. So you might run, say for instance, some people run payroll out of multiple companies, but you're still going to only report based off of one company in the system. You have that capability in the system to do that. Then you have employee maintenance. In employee maintenance is the new ACA button. When you click on that ACA button, it's going to now throw you off into a different screen where you can now set up the employees and whether they are self-insured or whether they have 1095Cs that are signed, which means they are covered underneath your policy, or maybe they're not covered underneath your health insurance policy. In that screen, underneath it, is where you will go through. If you check the box that they're self-insured, which simply means that you are insuring them, then it will bring up a box here it will bring up a box, and actually means flip to that one right here if they're self-insured, saying who the employees are, and you would then have to say what months they were covered. And so the example that they used here is he got married, and so the first 3 months his wife wasn't covered, but she was then covered for the months going forward. And then also if they don't provide self-insured coverage, then there's a different screen that you would go through, and then there's all the different box codes. You'll obviously need to go to look at your forms and the different, consult with your accountant or whoever gives you legal advice pertaining to this. Sage has it set up where you can put in all the different codes that are required in here so that you can then log your employee share and all that different information, and if there's safe harbor, all that stuff will be tracked in the system, because then this will show up on different reporting that is required in the system, and in this case the 1095C. In the payroll, federal, and e-filing though, is where they're now adding these reports for you. So there's going to be 2 new reports that are added to your federal e-filing and reporting, which is going to be your 1094C and your 1095C. So if you go into your federal e-filing reporting, that's where you'll now see that information. So what is the timing for this? It's been released for 2014, and it's been released for 2015 currently right now. And Sage has also released a spreadsheet where you can fill in this information into a spreadsheet and then simply import all this information directly into your Sage 100 system, which means you don't have to go into every single employee and key this information. You can just simply load all this information directly into a spreadsheet. So here's kind of what that spreadsheet is. Sage will give it to you, you fill it in, we'll work with you, tell you where the jobs are. Either we can import it for you or we can take you through a test import, and you'll be able to do that import. And that information for that spreadsheet is currently up on Sage City currently right now in the Affordable Care Act Center. So back over here again where the ACA is, you'll see where it says ACA Reporting Worksheet. That is where you will get that information. And this website will constantly be updated as different things from the government change as it comes along. So with that being said, to get there to the ACA Center, it's sagecity.na.sage.com/ACA. If you go there, that is where you will get all the information regarding the ACA. There's prep list out there, there's the Healthcare Reform Survival Guide, and that's also where you can get the spreadsheet. So now that being said, I'm going to open up the floor to any questions and so on and so forth. Does anybody have any questions regarding the ACA? I saw the message from Kathy on here. Yes, Kathy, I can definitely send you a copy of the PowerPoint. Do you want a copy of the ACA PowerPoint, or do you want a copy of the Sage 100 2015 PowerPoint? All right, perfect. I will make sure I get these over to Sherry, and she'll definitely get these sent out to you. Sherry, I'm going to go ahead and turn this back over to you to field questions, and I will answer as they come in. Please feel free to use the chat window, or if you want to take yourself off mute and ask any questions, feel free to do so.
Thank you, Ty.